Good evening once again, friends. What a joy to be knowing of a great soul as Sri Yukteshwarji's, to know of his life, to know of his passing, to have an account of his life. There's a little video of his life. As somebody was, saying to me some years ago, that imagine you have the voice of Jesus or the voice of Krishna, a picture of Krishna, and things like that. The way, because some things are left, or Rama, some things are left to our imagination and such, and they are all beautiful. Even the thought of God is so beautiful. However, in these times, it's just so wonderful, so lucky, so blessed we feel just to have the image, like I said, of these great masters, and especially of our path. Because for us they are our gurus, Paramahansa Yogananda ji particularly, but the entire line of gurus. And maybe some of you are watching this satsang for the first time, which is to say, perhaps you're getting introduced to his life, and maybe some others have known these teachings for decades. I'll try to present them in a way which makes, you might say, us think again more deeply of the gifts that have come already in our lives. Now, I was filled with gratitude this morning, anew, you might say, when I was spending time with the person I was totally meeting for the first time. We are looking for a new center. And as it happens, we are looking for a bungalow over here. And there's an agent who was taking us around, and there was this palatial house. And we said, yeah, we're looking for a big place. So whatever is there, let's go and see. And we went to this beautiful place and met a beautiful soul, the owner of the house, a man now in his 70s. And some of us went just in the uniform as I'm wearing right now. So the person instantly said, even before we met, as he was coming through his living room, oh, wonderful, what group are you from? And he said, Ananda Sangha. Have you heard of Paramahansa Yogananda? Right away, he said, oh, yes, Autobiography of a Yogi. What a beautiful book. What a marvelous book. So your Kriya practitioners and such, showed us the place, showed us the house and all. And then we all sat down to have some tea. We meditated briefly in his meditation room. We sat down to have tea. And this gentleman has his guru. He's a daily meditator for hours. And anyway, we started discussing about his pilgrimages, experience, what he did in the past, the ups and downs of life. And sometimes, it helps so much. You might say, what is wisdom on one level? Well, one aspect of wisdom is to learn before we suffer. Suffering is, you might say, the last resort that is left to in the universal scheme of things, that if we are just not getting a certain message or lesson, then we need to suffer. And it is almost universal. It's certainly not a pleasant experience to suffer, but wisdom, you might say, is sometimes you listen to another person's story, and if you take it to heart, like Sri Yukteshwarji used to say, there's a moral in most stories. He said, then, we can learn. And this gentleman was sharing how, from the heights of business, and I won't go in the details, he said, in a week's time, from having a global work, he was brought down to almost nothing, losing tens and tens of crores decades ago. And he said it was all like, and then I commented to him before he even finished that account. I said, I have to say, sir, you are so joyful for what you've gone through. And I was telling friends later on that as much as I felt that, you see, different lineages, paths, practices have different beliefs, and you might say teachings. Kriyananda ji used to very wisely put it. He said we should go to the saints for their inspiration, but we should, for instruction, we should go back only to our guru. So different paths have different emphasis, because people are different, personalities are different, needs are different. But you do feel inspired, with many people. But he said when it comes down to instruction, and actually it's always very interesting that the guru of this great gentleman we met today, he and Swami Kriyananda ji had met decades ago, and there was a difference of opinion over there, you might say. And of course, Swami ji would say that I would do what my guru told me to do. And so, he, of course, continued that way. Nonetheless, uh, one thing Sir mentioned is something I was like, whenever I hear it, it's like this little smile inside me goes, because, it's a common belief in India. And it's not just about the believing in a fact. That belief system then changes us, or I should say sometimes does not allow us to change ourselves, our environment, our thought pattern, perhaps the hope that we can find God right here, right now, especially in this life. And that statement is, as this gentleman said, oh, but in the Kali Yuga that we live, how hard it is to find satsang like this, how hard it is to find saints, and he said, because we are in Kali Yuga. Now, many Indians, now Swami, when he came to India in 1958, he said that was a common belief. You go around, even today, it's a very common belief, even though the signs of us being in a new age, at least, in an age of energy, Dwapar, in Rig Veda itself, it is given the signs and symptoms, you might say, of Dwapar Yuga. Each Yuga it's given. It's an age of energy. Energy is being harnessed outside, but energy is also expressed inside. You meet a certain person, what's their energy like? You go to a certain place, what's the energy like? You eat a certain food. Now, this is a universal principle. Even in the dark ages, people have known these principles, especially the spiritually evolved people or the saints. But for mass consciousness, most people still believe, unfortunately, that we are somehow biding our time for those 430,000 years or so that the incorrect mathematical calculations say is that we have to go through before a new age is ushered in. Think of the effect it may have on our mind. Now, I'm sure many times people believe, oh, I don't think that must be true. But how many people probe that question further to come perhaps to the answer that was provided by Swami Sri Yukteshwarji, I believe even before 1895, when he wrote the account of our planet being in Dwapar Yuga. He wrote the book, The Holy Science. And that gift, over 100 years, 125 years now, you might say, have passed. Bit by bit, mankind changes. It's so easy now in retrospect to see the dogmatism that prevails not just in religion, but also in perhaps the fields of science. It is just so hard. And you might say it is what it is, but he brought an answer which was a monumental shift. He declared that answer, that we are in a new yoga, new age, through pamphlets, through articles, through his own magazine that he used to print, through processions, through his discourses. Above all, he allowed that idea to go forward by ensuring the book is printed, but above all, by training Paramhans Yogananda ji, sending him to the West. Remember, Sri Yukteshwarji had such a scientific temperament that at a decisive point in his life, he was wondering, should I focus more on science or should I focus on spirituality? And you might say, Babaji, seeing that interest, said, why don't you train a disciple who will then bridge these two, bridge East and West, bridge science and spirituality. And true to Sri Yukteshwarji's training, Paramhans Yogananda ji, when he went to America over a century ago, he gave his first talk in America, which was titled The Science of Religion. That something as old as religions, because his guru showed the parallels between the great religions in this world, that Yogananda ji was saying it is a science. But friends, again, think of that gift that we have and how, if we can bring that into our day-to-day life. Because now, yes, you may say, well, how does my life really change? I am being born into Dwapar Yuga. I don't think it had much of a bearing on me. On a day-to-day basis, I don't think, oh, I'm in Dwapar Yuga, I'm in Dwapar Yuga, but maybe we should think that way. Well, what does Dwapar Yuga, what does this revolutionary truth that God expressed through Sri Yukteshwarji and Master's teachings, what does it show us? Well, first of all, it showed that, that science and spirituality have been actually moving hand in hand. That 1699, Sri Yukteshwarji said, to be precise, is when we entered the transition and movement towards Dwapar Yuga. Early 1700s, maybe within the first decade, I think, or maybe it was 1704 or 5, the steam engine is invented. Further machinery is invented. Industrial revolution comes. Later on, electricity is invented. Telegram is invented. email, phone calls before that, air travel, space travel is inventing. Atomic age is ushered in, and we are seeing outwardly at least, oh, there's so much, houses have electricity. Today, it's hard to believe when you tell somebody that maybe your household doesn't have electricity, or a blackout comes. As we know, recently there was global blackouts here and there. It becomes international news that suddenly people don't have electricity. It's become such a common, expected reality of life. Well, how about the electricity inside? If man is so scientific outside, why not ask the question, are we really in a new age? Are we really, is there really, let us say, a God over there? Because in his very little book, The Holy Science, and again, through his disciple Yogananda ji, Sri Yukteshwar expressed all these questions that come to people, if but we will ask the question and be sincere in our quest. The good karma is there is an answer given by these masters, and we find ourselves drawn and digging this treasure trove to find more and more answers. Well, so if we can have a scientific temperament, Sri Yukteswarji said, outside, for example, he joined a medical college in his times and he dropped out after one, some people say 2 semesters. And he said the emphasis was primarily on the body. Well, interestingly, it's still primarily on the body in many modern practices of health and healing. But he was saying, why not? Why keep a dogmatism over there? Now, on one level, there is free will, there is a momentum to the past. We are coming out of 2,400 years of dark ages, first descending, then ascending. Even to allow people to arrive, you might say, at least those who are having the karma in the Dwapar age, it just takes time. Again, masses after masses after masses of people, civilization. It comes with a certain, you might say, soul memory that, oh, I've come from there, I'm familiar with that, that is how it must be. He said, why not be open, whether you're in the religious field or in the dogmatic? I liked a beautiful statement this gentleman made today. He said, I am a Jain, but I practice the yoga taught by Hindu masters, and I believe in some other things. And his family is all confused. It's like this old man is losing it. And he said, but isn't the goal of spirituality to go beyond religion? That how many people consciously think of that? Again, let's say it's been close to a century, we discovered that atoms, when cracked open, release so much energy. Well, Sri Yukteshwarji said, why not look for those details, those detailed experiences, explanations in ourselves? What happens when you focus on your heart's energy? How much energy is in your heart? Let's take, for example, what is the power of your love, forgiveness, understanding? He spoke, I won't go in the details of certain meannesses of our heart, which stop that naturally present energy to express itself. It's like there are so many layers. That's another explanation he gave, or revived, you might say, that the koshas, the sheets we have in our understanding, in our body. And he said, all we have to do is understand it, be open to the possibility, experience day by day. If you have the hunger, as he called it, devotion, to know what's really going on, what really God and the great masters bring us as a gift, he said, keep a scientific attitude to religion. And he said, step by step, you could also see what are the energies within yourself. Think of another simple thing that you and I face on a daily basis. Finally, our long journey brings us to the understanding that, okay, there is a God, there are saints. How nice to know, how nice to have their protection. Sri Yukteshwarji was not satisfied with that. He said, are you allowing God, inviting God to guide you down into the details of your life? When Sri Yukteshwarji was asked by Yogananda to give him discipleship, he said, give me first your unconditional love and your unconditional obedience. Now, at the surface, it may seem like, oh, he's made it unconditional. It's almost like he got a contract, he got a slave in a disciple. That is how sometimes we view it. Not at all. What he's saying is there are so many past influences that you're coming with, Mukunda, Yogananda's little name. Unless you allow an entirely new perspective on how you have been doing things, understanding them, approaching them, perhaps even questioning them, you will not arrive at the wisdom which you yourself are seeking. So look at this paradox. Master used to say the very mind which is questioning is infected. The very ego which is wanting to improve itself is infected with the disease of individuality, with the disease of ignorance, with the disease of I. And it's just like these things go in circles, because after this, there's nothing else to solve. Like this great soul was so openly sharing with us, you might say, on one level strangers, on the other hand there was friendship. He just declared numbers and bank balances and things that was going up and down in his life. And I said, what a marvelous journey you've had to come out, so beautifully with the wisdom. I said, sir, I feel this is the wisdom, this is the wealth in one lifetime you've gathered. And he said, oh yes, this wealth no stock market can now take away from me, no changing of bank balances and business trends can take. He says, this is ultimately the understanding I got, that this is what stays with us. Similarly, now how do we get, you might say, that understanding of God down into the details? If we are in this age of Dwapar Yoga, I say if for those who are completely new, because I want you to probe that question and don't think of it in the larger scheme of times that, okay, it is what it is. How does it matter to me? It does, friends. Paramahansa Yogananda ji said the most important thing on the spiritual path is attunement. Swami Kriyananda ji, our own teacher and Yogananda's disciple, used to say, actually, attunement, yes, to Guru can bring us God, but he said attunement goes into a subject. You can attune yourself to the heart of a subject, the heart of a skill. And he said, then you can very quickly learn that skill. You can very quickly make it your own. And it is more possible now, more challenging also, I'll explain, in this age of Dwapar. Why? Let's say you're on YouTube or Facebook. I don't spend too much time there because it's just like after even 10 minutes, sometimes you come out and it's like you visited 3 planets or something, that there is so much going on video to video. It's so different, so much content. But this is the age of energy. People are learning new things. They are learning new skills. They have discovering potentials inside them. Just like this friend of ours, they go down, they come up, they go up, they come down. Everybody is feeling a certain flow of wisdom through them, and people are sharing that. So first of all, to attune ourselves to benefit from this yoga itself, Sri Yukteshwarji said, get energy, outward energy, devotional energy, mental energy to ask the right questions, ultimately the kind of energy which helps us persevere through the path. And when we have energy, that's the first requisite, you might say, to move fast. Second comes concentration. You have a lot of energy, but if you don't know where you want to focus it, you may actually make very rapid progress in one field, only to abandon it just as quickly for something else. And then because you have a lot of energy, that makes sense, and then you shift. And Swami Kriyananda ji used to put it this way. He says, people's loyalties are not as deep. That ideally, depth, and you might say how deep we go and what we go into, concentration, energy, he said these qualities can go hand in hand. I'll give you an example, friends, that Sri Yukteshwarji used to narrate. There was a yogi who was wandering in the forest, and in his meditations, he developed certain powers. And he realized, as he was getting that feeling, he thought of testing it, and an inner voice said to him, anything that you want right now can be manifested for you. And on one level, you might say, oh, wow, what a power. Well, many people, everybody actually has that power. I remember many decades ago, a saint was asked by somebody, it looks like you have a printing press for currency, rupees in your ashram, because wherever he used to go, he used to pull out little notes out of a very thin notebook and do big, big, big purchases. And his direct disciple told me this story. So naturally, the word spread around that this Guruji has a lot of money. So the police said, "Do you have a printing press?" He said, "Everybody has a divine printing press to print currency, but most people don't know how to use it." And the police officer said, "Enough of that. Where is this printing press?" He said, "In that room." And of course, there was nothing people knew in that room. But just to finish the story, this guru manifested a tiger in that room. So when this police officer went, he said, "Okay, get ready." And he opened the room, and sure enough, there was no currency printing machine. There was a tiger over there. And basically, the guru was saying, "Leave me alone. This, I don't do these things." That this devotee's father told me the story personally. It happened before him, that sometimes when you have this kind of a power, you might say, to manifest something, as this yogi had, this yogi thought, wouldn't it be so nice in this forest to have a house? And he just had to think, and suddenly a beautiful palatial house manifested itself. And he said, "Oh, this is amazing." And then he said, "Oh, but it's empty." And he immediately looked around and thought of furniture, paintings, curtains, and one after another, right away, they all manifested themselves. He said, "Well, now I need actually an army of servants to take care of them and to take care of me. This house should not feel empty." So he clapped his hands, and suddenly very humble, dutiful servants manifested, and they were cleaning, polishing, making tea and food. And he said, "How wonderful. God has finally granted me, what I wanted to see. This is what the Siddhis can do." And then he moved, he said, "Now let me enjoy this gift I have received." And he went from room to room to room. And he was enjoying the beauty and furnishing them by his will. And suddenly he went to one room where he noticed it was bare. And but before he could think of furnishing that place, he heard the sound of a tiger. You see, this he was a yogi and he was in a forest, so he had manifested this palace right then and there. So there were tigers right in the neighborhood, and his thought, and there was a window which was open. And he said, "Oh my goodness, I'm alone in this room. I wonder what would happen if that tiger were to jump through this window and eat me." And that such was the power of his mind, that instantly that was manifested, and the tiger came and devoured him. And Sri Yukteshwarji used to mention this story, that use your energy, use your power of concentration very carefully, especially in this age of Dwapar, because energy is available for our disposal. Like this friend of ours learned, reminded us, you might say, today, and I hope his story reminds you what is the goal of life. That we can, on one level, God wants us to create a beautiful world, and it's good to create beauty around us, a beautiful home, big home, small home. The bottom line is, what does God want? Because he is the source of everything. He is the source of time. He is the source of the yugas. He is the source of prana. Unhone prana tyag diya, as I was saying in the very introduction of today's talk, that God has given us. He has created us. He has become us, you might say. He has given us this little pocket money called prana. Go, live, multiply that prana. See, using that little investment by practicing pranayam, you might say, kriya, whatever your guru says. If you can go back, take a ticket back to the kingdom of God, that would be success. What a game this is. How much freedom there is to each person. How many levels of consciousness there are. How scientifically nothing goes wrong, even in the spirit world. How God plays a role, Guru plays a role, the disciple has to play his role. All these things go simultaneously, hand in hand, everywhere in creation. And it is baffling to the human mind. But then comes a master to simplify, to clarify. As Yoganandaji said in his poem, which I read in the beginning, My Guru, he said, "Thou voice, spoken voice of silent God." That is the value that this great masters bring. That is the value. That is the wisdom Sri Yukteshwarji brought. That ask what is God's will. Otherwise, who knows what detour will come? Who knows? And there again, we'll be finding ourselves, how did I land up over here? Well, using your own free will, using your understanding, by wishing it, by going again and again and again with those whims and fancies and seeds of past karma. When they sprout, they taste so wonderful. Why? Because we've had them, we've harbored, nurtured, prayed perhaps for them in past lives. And now finally when they blossom, their taste is good. But like Swami say, oh, how can anything be good when it doesn't have God in it, when it doesn't lead us to God, to God's will? So let's bear that in mind as we have access, when we are breathing, when we are alive, when our thoughts are running. May those thoughts be Guru's thoughts, God's thoughts. May again and again and again, with each condition, you might say, maybe apply that unconditional love, that Guruji, don't you test me. And if you will, let me prove again and again and again that I live only to serve you, to do thy will. And I'd like to close with this little lesson, you might say, on a practical level for you and me. Every day, every single morning, or if you're a night meditator, maybe put it that way. There's a little story, Yoganandaji, when he started living in his guru's ashram, that he narrated, that he said his guru would wake up and he would know that he has woken up because the snoring would stop, or sometimes he would just hear a gentle movement of the body. And he said, but then Sri Yukteshwarji's snoring and breathing would altogether stop. First, he was quite alarmed. Then he understood that his guru basically enters Samadhi and he's with God. What a beautiful thing, no? Yukteshwar, united with God and leading by example also that way. That first thing in the morning, be with God. Like a good employee would, take a download. God, here I am in the office. What do you want? What is the office? This world is an office of God, a workplace of God. We are here to serve him. We are here, we've been sent by him to make it a good place, but to also graduate from here and say, God, here's another morning. What do you want me to do? Because that is wisdom, friends. The more you take even one step, oh, let me create this mansion of my own understanding. That mansion could be a mansion of whatever, your willingness to meditate, unwillingness, willingness to do this, unwillingness. The one thing leads to the other, till we realize we were given so much wealth. Everybody is equally loved by God. Why do we reach one by one? Because he designed it so that those who apply themselves, those who want it, it has to happen, like I said in the beginning, only one time. We are on a journey which is baffling. And each step, that keen discrimination that Sri Yukteshwarji used to say, if you bring that, balance your heart and mind. And as I was trying to narrate through that final story, seek ye first the kingdom of God, rest all these things shall be added unto you. By asking God, by asking Guru, think of Yogananda ji. What a marvelous life he had. Think of Sri Kriyananda ji. What a marvelous life he had. Because first you ask God, and then whatever God says, that is what we do. Life is so simple. But if we don't lack in wisdom, or to the degree ignorance abounds in us, which is the opposite of wisdom, it seems like we shouldn't do that. But let's take this vow, let's renew that, let's invite Sri Yukteshwarji's presence in our lives to help us, to guide us, to keep the doors of our heart open to his presence, that step by step, like Master used to say, you are always on neutral ground. But anytime you choose Satan, he pulls you more and more and more. Anytime you choose God, he pulls more and more and more. He says the influences are equal. What are you choosing? So may going forward, wisdom increase in us. Wisdom expresses itself as joy, as an inner certainty, as intuition, feeling the presence of the Master closely in our heart. Holding that presence more and more in our heart, we serve Him. His thoughts become our thoughts. And what a marvelous thing. And that is how Sri Yukteswarji explained, whether it be through astrology, whether it be through pranayam. But he said, down to the details, the devotee is guided. And let's look for that guidance. Let's pray for His grace today, especially in this coming year, to receive that guidance. Om Guru.